Good afternoon. Welcome to the Return to Service, How to Consistently Keep Promises and Delight Your Guests. I'm proud to introduce our panelists. We have Annie Cazares, who serves as the Chief of Staff for Topgolf. She's an esteemed professional with a focus on strategy. She has a long history of working in the entertainment industry, and she's driven various initiatives involving operations management, event management, and industrial engineering. Welcome, Annie. Tim Mclaughlin, a successful technology entrepreneur and investor. He was co-founder, CTO, and CEO of SiteWorks before transitioning to chairman of the board in June 2015. He has a degree in mechanical engineering with educational excursions into music, language, art, and artificial intelligence. He co-founded Caboose Brewery in Vienna, Virginia, and is currently CEO of GoTab. Scott Lovejoy, come on up. Scott is the Vice President of Technology and Innovation for Topgolf, where he is responsible for leading the U.S. and U.K. technology innovation teams, overseeing venue and home office technology, applications, infrastructure, and support. Scott joined Topgolf in 2016 with a focus on scaling and growing Topgolf's technology efforts while delivering excellent guest and associate experiences. Our final panelist is Chef Rick Sweeney. He was raised in the restaurant business, having parents who owned bakeries and managed eateries in his native Long Island. After relocating to America's finest city and graduating from San Diego Culinary Institute, he accepted a position as a line cook at Harrah's Rincon Resort and Casino. He has appeared as a contestant on Top Chef and is the host of various CW live events and is a Restaurant 365 specialist. Please join me in welcoming our esteemed presenters and facilitators to this session. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. Cool. Sounds like it is. Thank you, everybody, for coming. We are going to try to keep it as real as possible and hopefully as interactive as possible. So I would say as we go through things, we'll probably cover each of our different areas, but do feel free at the end of each section to ask your questions rather than holding them all till the end. We also will be doing a demo at the end so you can get some idea of what is the difference. So hopefully you stick around to see that. So we have a philosophy at GoTab, which is really about stop making your guests work. And really, we believe that's the key to success in many ways. Happier guests, frankly, bigger spending, more repeat visits. Go ahead, Gerard. And so the first one is really guesswork is no fun. And let me caveat this. Different guests are going to have different expectations of what is work. Some guests think ordering on their phone is a great amount of work. Some guests think ordering on their phone is much less work than ordering from a server. And what you're going to quickly find out if you do some of the things that we do is their idea of work is very different from what yours may be. But I think everybody will agree that paying is work. It's not fun for anybody. Getting paid is fun, but paying is not fun. And the last one is really just, waiting. Waiting's terrible, whether it's in a line, waiting for a server, or, waiting to order, waiting for your food. All those things are not fun. Second thing I'll touch on before we move on is critical data is missing. This is kind of a hypothesis we had when we started in 2016. It's really hard to focus on your guests when your guests aren't in your database. And we think it's really hard to understand what they want. And your POS being one of your core databases, I find it about ironic being someone from outside the industry that there's no record of a customer in most POSs. And the last one is that administration of these sort of mix of systems is very challenging and very expensive. And it creates a lot of error, creates a lot of bad experiences. We'll go into a little more detail about that, and obviously we'll be sharing that. Go ahead, Bro. Just so people know, QRs were around before COVID. Nobody believed they existed in the U.S., and they also thought they were silly. I can speak from experience selling QRs in 2018 once they were adopted on the iPhone. Most people said, what in the heck are you doing? This has no relevance. Quick history excursion. The reason they weren't relevant in the US is the iPhone didn't support them until 2017. That's why they weren't relevant. They didn't work in this country. They worked in every other country because Android supported it, but they didn't work here. So we've had this hypothesis of reducing pain. We kind of worked backward. At GoTab, we are now a full POS. We are known for our QR ordering. But the thing is, we operate very differently because we started with guest control as the first premise, and then management control is second. I'm not going to go into all this stuff, but you get some idea of some of the different areas we get into. Go ahead. Some of our brands we work with, we are a bit unusual. This is our first time at Mertech. I'm actually very proud to be here with all these esteemed people. I never would have thought we would have started with enterprise, to be honest. We do a lot of SMB work. We do a lot of high volume single units, which, that's a $15 million F&B operation in a single restaurant is not something most places are doing. And it's a logistically challenging system. But we also do little coffee shops. You won't find them on the logo slide here. So we work with a lot of big brands and a lot of very small brands. Good. And then the last couple things I'll touch on is the ecosystem as we see it is very challenged in the restaurant world. I come from enterprise software. I did enterprise software for 12 years. In the enterprise software world, the idea of not owning your customer data is actually, it's not even discussed because it's laughable. No one would walk into a company and say, I'm going to sell you a system and I'm not going to let you have your data. That's just not viable. And the idea of not having an API to get at that data at any point in time is not something that people would entertain either. So the way I kind of experienced the software ecosystem within hospitality is it was a Frankenstein. It's a bunch of stuff sort of like just piled on top of each other to solve a small problem. And again, if you look at that centerpiece of the POS on the left-hand side, which you probably can't see zoomed out as far as you are, there's no customer record in the POS. There's all these customer data points sort of floating around it. But there's no understanding of customers, there's no understanding of logistics. There's some pretty fundamental pieces missing. Go ahead, Gerard. And then the last thing I'm going to say before you jump over to the experts, the people you want to actually listen to, is the impact is massive, like crazy massive. They may or may not share the numbers and the details of what happens when you adopt this kind of technology. Our biggest one, which I'm not going to, you can maybe ask me later and I'll whisper it to you. They're doing 96% more sales on QRs than they were before. They're an extreme case. They have huge lines. It's a tourist destination. I was kind of blown away when I heard the numbers, but the fact is nobody likes waiting in lines. It's an unpleasant experience. You buy less, you leave earlier. It's just all around win for both guests and for operators. So if you're not looking at this, and hopefully if you're here, you probably are looking at it or doing it, but we see huge impact. And just for reference too, in some of these places, QR ordering, and not at Topgolf, but at Stone, QR ordering is 90+% of all orders. So it's not a little bit, it's a lot. And it's a very different picture of operations. Go ahead, Joe. With that said, I want to pass it off quickly to Rich, who graciously joined us because Greg, the VP of Hospitality, is enjoying a wonderful vacation in Costa Rica, and he said he couldn't make it back for this. So Rich is wonderful, and we've worked with him for many years during his tenure at Stone, but he is standing in. So he's not going to.
I'm about twice the size of Greg, so I have to give twice as much information. I've had a great time when I was at Stone. It's an amazing company. It's still incredibly near and dear to my heart and my beer belly. And I had the joy of getting to work with GoTab while I was there. So more than happy to be here and share my experience with everybody. So before GoTab, basically we started talking to GoTab in about 2019, trying to figure out, with $14 minimum wage in San Diego, how do you try to keep an eye on your labor without sacrificing your guest experience, as well as how do you try to integrate a new platform with something that we already had. So as Stone was growing and trying to expand to go international, we ended up going with Symphony. And ended up, as COVID started to become more of a thing, we no longer needed to worry about going international, but we already had Symphony in place, so we needed to find something that would be able to integrate with the systems that we already had. And luckily, we figured out that GoTab would be able to be that kind of missing link piece to connect the dots together. Trying to make sure I didn't miss anything on there. Tried it out as kind of like a little bit of a sample test. Let's see how it goes. Obviously, everybody knows coming out of COVID as places were starting to reopen, it was still really weird trying to adjust. However, we noticed that while it wasn't a super smooth path of getting from point A to point B, we figured out that using GoTab was something that we were really interested in, and we noticed that the guests overall were having a really great experience with it. So our guest experience, we kind of offered we started out doing strictly just GoTab service. We had the QR spots on the table. Guests would be able to scan those. The host or hostess would kind of interact with them. We've since kind of migrated to more of what we call the hybrid version of service. So the guest can either start their own tab or somebody, for Stone, we had all Cicerones. They were all certified. So they would go around to interact with the guest and talk to them about the beer itself. Obviously, if you're coming to Stone and you want to try one of the 40 taps of beer that's out on their garden, you want to know a little bit more about it. So kind of a little bit more of an interactive experience. However, then it could still be handed off. And additionally, we didn't want guests to feel that technology was stopping their interaction with someone from the team. So the fact that there's also messaging available as well gave managers access directly to respond to guest feedback from anywhere that they were in the restaurant.
Hey, Rich, could you expand a little bit? Because on the East Coast, breweries don't have menus as extensive and high quality as Stone does. So what's like the food beverage mix, just so people don't think this is just slinging beers?
So Stone is slightly different than most other breweries. The bistros that exist in San Diego only exist for one reason, according to one of the founders, and that is so that people have a place to have really good food while they're enjoying all of our amazing beer. So my food was secondary to all of the amazing beer that we had. I was totally okay with it because if you've ever had Stone's beers, they are incredible. But the mix overall was probably about 60-40 at any given point in time, where we were selling more food than bar, whether that be beer, wine, seltzers, or cocktails. So it's, again, a very food-driven menu as opposed to most breweries that are a little bit more, more beer-centric with like snacks.
I haven't gotten to go there since Rich has left, so I'm assuming the food's still good, but it was amazing when I did go. So.
I left it to my very capable right and left hands, who I still keep in touch with. So fingers crossed it's going well, especially since I sent my boss one of my old recipes to be able to make it at home. So he hasn't fired me yet, so I think we're still doing okay. And then just kind of our steps in service, whether a guest was making an online reservation or they were coming in off the street. Whoever is taking them to the table is asking them, have you been in a Stone before? Everybody's used to that, kind of standard question, but it was also, have you been in the last year? And trying to find out, have you interacted with the GoTab QR code system? Because we did totally switch it over from integrating with Micros, the guests needed to be able to have the point of reference for being able to use the system, as well as understand that they're not just being thrown into the wild. The team is still available to help. From there, depending on the style of service that the guests would prefer, some people want to scan their own, start their own tab. They want to be fully independent, whether that was for COVID concerns or I have a lot of really socially awkward coding friends who just like to be able to not interact with the server, or they have that amazing luck like I do, where as soon as you take a bite, that's when somebody comes over to check on you. So they loved this because it was frictionless. It was super contact free. So within that, you can have that experience, or a server could come over, get your tab started, answer questions about beer, and then be able to produce the QR code that you can then scan, pick up your own tab. So throughout the entire process, it's meant to be as guest-driven as they want. If they want the interaction with the team, they have it. If they want less interaction, they can have that. And what we found is for Stone being a 30,000 square foot restaurant, we were able to operate using anywhere from 30 to 50% of the front of house staff that we had for pre-pandemic levels, and we were seeing sales volume that was significantly higher than 2019.
So you heard that, almost an acre? That's how big this restaurant is.
Most restaurants you can get from the kitchen to the furthest point in typically 60 to 90 seconds. Every restaurant I've ever worked in, no matter how big it was, I've always done the test. From the line all the way out to the furthest table, usually 60 to 90 seconds. For me to go from the expo window all the way out to the furthest part of the garden took about 2.5 minutes. So food runners especially would just be, they were getting their steps in there all the time. So it's definitely a big venue. But again, that also played into the fact that using something like the frictionless ordering through GoTab, if somebody wanted to get a refill of a beer, they wanted to get something different, they just wanted to pay their tab. They're not trying to look around for a server who may be trying to hustle to get from the kitchen. I don't know if you guys know, sometimes chefs are a little bit friction full, where when we want food run out of the kitchen, we have a tendency to raise our voice and not be the most pleasant people. And at Stone, all the service team had walkie-talkies, and you don't want me barking in your ear via walkie-talkie, because while I may seem cuddly and sweet, when my food is dying in the window, I'm definitely not. So instead, it gave the guests the option for being able to take care of their check. If they wanted to order something else, they could look things up, or if they had a question, they could ask it directly through GoTab as well. Yeah, and then kind of just tagging in on this now, since while I was still at Stone, we made the full transition from Symphony over to GoTab point of sale, including having the KDS screens in the kitchen. We've rolled it out for all of our company stores as well, so that's more of a merchandise, bottle beer, kind of getting growler fills and things like that to go. It's been amazing to be able to see you can have so much flexibility going across the board, as well as now Stone is piloting some newer programs that Tim can definitely speak to a little bit better, but for being able to really dig into all the data that you can actually get from your guests. Like Tim mentioned before, your point of sale system historically doesn't have any of that individual guest data, but if guests are creating profiles and they're ordering the same thing every time they come in, and they're ordering through that same platform, you're now able to get insights into, well, what is the beer that they're drinking the most of? And if our brewer comes up with something that's great, we can now specifically market towards those people who are coming in of, hey, we're testing out something new, come check it out. And now you're able to leverage all of that data that you never had access to before.
If those of you who have customer data profiles or anything like that, you can feed someone earlier was talking about payer data. Which I think is not nearly granular enough. You should be able to see every person at the table, not just the person who paid. There's, I think the woman from the ice cream place, she was saying that a lot more men buy ice cream. And I think her data might actually just be that a lot more men pay for ice cream. But I don't know that, she has real perspective on that, because everybody except for the payer is invisible. Scott, you want to kick this off?
This thing on? Okay, great. The AV here is masterful because I can't hear my own voice in my ear. It's amazing. So you can go ahead with the next slide. Okay, I guess my first question is, raise of hands, who's heard of Topgolf Entertainment? Okay, who's actually been to a Topgolf venue? Okay, so I don't need to go into a whole lot of detail, but there are some important parts of these slides I wanted to cover. So we are a global sports and entertainment community making great times for all. On the next slide, what you may not know is that we're divided into several different business units. If you've watched a PGA Tour event and you see the blue trace behind when Jordan Spieth or Tiger hit the ball, that's our Top Tracer group out of Sweden. If you've been to a venue, you may play Angry Birds and see that same trace as it's knocking down a castle and the pigs are smiling and laughing at you and all this sort of stuff, right? But you may also have played the World Golf Tour application. It's the #1 golf app on Android and Apple. And we leverage a lot of the same game methodologies and all that stuff. On the bottom side of the slide there, we also have Topgolf Live, which is a combination of experiences at stadiums and such. So you can actually we went to Fenway Park, and you can sit in the outfield, you can stand in the outfield and hit a 9-iron across the field. It's a pretty cool experience. And then we have live content studios. So imagine just the section of the slide that's location-based, though. Our Topgolf venues and Top Tracer ranges, we sell that same trace product in the games to driving ranges around the world. I think we're in 28 countries when I last heard. But we're very location-based in our venue business. So you can go to the next slide. Okay, so this is where there's a picture on the left there. Many of you have been to a Topgolf. We have lots of space. We're built on 12 to 15 acres, but only the T-line, the 3 floors of the T-line, or 4 floors if you're here in Vegas, have guests, and we're playing music as you're playing the Topgolf game, Angry Birds, and so on. And our bay hosts and runners are delivering food from the kitchen, and that delivery time is really important. I can speak to that because the worst experience is to have an old-fashioned with melted ice showing up at your bay, or your food comes out cold while you're there with your buddies or your family or whatever. So the location-based part of this is a really key thing. And Annie's going to get into more details of our implementation, but every QR code you scan at a Topgolf is location aware, so it knows what day you're at. We track all the data of the guest that ordered the food. It goes in through our point of sale system and into the KDS and comes back out. So this is not pulling up a PDF menu. This is actually pulling up where you can order your old fashioned or nachos or whatever else it is. So as of this week, we have it's over 70. I want to say 75 Topgolf venues, the traditional venues. Cool. Next slide.
Do you guys talk about like F&B versus other revenue in on-premise, just so people have some idea? It's on here.
Yeah. So I'll go into that. So I think to kind of tee up this slide, we wanted to give you a little bit of a background of our tech stack, like what happens in the background, what happens on the guest side. There are a couple pieces of strategy that I think are important to think about as we're kind of going through this. So 3 realities in the world. One right now is that guests in general are using mobile more than ever. Right? So that's one piece of strategy that has kind of led to where we're going right now. 2 is there seems to be a situation right now where people do not want to wait. Right? Like that seems to be growing more and more than ever before. And 3 is what we call the comeback kid of 2020, which is the QR. That thing, like, no one ever thought of the QR code would come back the way it did in 2020. So what we did, a couple years ago, we really laid out, here's our guest experience. We have booking, so what happens at booking. And right now we have 2 pieces of software, or actually 3 pieces of software that kind of support our booking. On the front end, from what the guests can see, we have 2 softwares. We have one that supports event booking, and we have one that supports reservations. On the back end, we have a Salesforce platform that supports when people call in to us and want to book. The next piece, and the reason that one of the 2 pieces is green, is because that was a gap that we found kind of in our tech space. And that we knew that people want to take control of their experience, and we had a gap where we weren't allowing our guests to take control of the experience. And so what we are currently testing is join the waitlist. So giving the guests the ability to join via their mobile device without having to talk to a human. On the back end, we have an internal software that supports kind of the seating of our bays. The next piece is the sign-in piece. So this may be kind of unique to the entertainment space, but we collect data on every single person that comes to Topgolf. So that does allow us to market differently, and it is an important piece. But as we were kind of looking at further down the line, it's like, how do we connect that data all together? So we have a sign-in piece. So we do we basically make everybody sign into our game panel so that we can collect that data. The next piece is the ordering piece, and that was another area where we saw a gap in our tech stack. So the ability to give guests the ability to order through their own mobile device. And then on the back end, obviously, we have the POS that supports that, and we have the inventory management system that supports that. And then we have our gameplay system. That's an internal system that's both on the back end and on the front end. The guests interact with that. And then we have a checkout. Obviously, before any sort of mobile ordering testing, we had the POS really just supporting that. So by filling in those 3 gaps, we allowed for us to allow our guests to have all the control, right? Like we're moving towards that reality in the world, so we needed to fill that up. And when we first started down this path, we were actually going down the kiosk route. So, and on Join the Waitlist, we had built these kiosks that you could go and literally join the waitlist in our lobbies on a kiosk. in the ordering and checking out side, we had built a kiosk that was basically in the bay and you could order. And then COVID made us take a step back and say, what is the reality of the world? Why are we investing in all of this kiosk infrastructure when we know that the world is going to mobile? And so that's kind of when we shifted our strategy, and we have now since been testing the mobile sector. So if you go to the next page, I think, join the waitlist has been a relatively easy, I would say, implementation. Like we know the guests want it. It's relatively easy. It hooks up to our reservation system. I would say when we went down the path of trying to figure out how do we fill that gap in the mobile ordering space, it was a much more complicated problem because you have the gameplay, which people are paying for gameplay. We needed the gameplay on the check, and we needed the ability to split that check. We wanted to make sure that whatever we did didn't affect the guest experience in a negative way. We wanted to make it more positive and more in their hands. So we needed to have some pretty advanced tab functionality. So allowing somebody to open a tab and then add to those orders and then close it at any time during their experience, as opposed to, when we looked at a lot of softwares in this space were all about you have to pay before you order. And we really didn't want that for our guests. We wanted to say, hey, let's allow them to open the tab, let's allow them to order and then pay when they want. And so that was another piece of functionality that we really wanted. We had existing POSs, we had existing gift card providers, and we needed a lot of integration between those systems to make this very guest-friendly. We know another reality of the world is this whole mobile payment, and using your mobile wallet to pay. I don't know if you guys have noticed this as you go to the grocery store now, and I feel like this has happened in the last 3 months, that every single grocery store now you can pay with your mobile phone and you never need to actually carry a card. We are very aware of that, and we know that Topgolf currently does not have a solution for it, and so we needed to have the ability for you to pay with Apple Pay and Google Pay and that sort of stuff. We had a lot of legal requirements, so as you think about any sort of mobile ordering, there's going to be legal requirements because we do sell alcohol, and how do we make sure that we're keeping our guests safe and keeping us safe using a mobile ordering system. And then we know that there's power in connecting the F&B to our membership. So if we can tell who is our highest frequency, our highest spenders, we can market to them differently, right? We can try to get those highest spenders back in the door. And so we wanted the ability to connect that back. And so GoTab actually had a really interesting way to do it. I mean, they collect the phone number up front, which is the same unique identifier that we use in our membership database. And so we're able to kind of connect that data back. So eventually we will have all that kind of streamlined and we can kind of connect it all together. So we've been looking at, we've been testing mobile ordering and join the waitlist. And I won't go too much into join the waitlist, but I'll talk a little bit more about mobile ordering. I mean, in terms of what we've seen, if you go to the next slide, there's 4 things that we look at when we are measuring kind of the success of this. There's one is overall satisfaction from our guests. Did their satisfaction go up? The 2 is around spend per visit. So like Tim said, spending with mobile ordering, we have seen a pretty significant jump from implementing that and people just ordering more because they have the accessibility to order more. The 3rd is around, I can't even read it now, tips. We wanted to make sure that anything that we did didn't affect our associates in a negative way. And so we've been monitoring tips. And interestingly enough, the tips have actually gone up with the mobile ordering because the check average has gone up. And then the last thing that we wanted to make sure was we wanted to look at the labor model. So we did kind of a time study on what do our bay hosts spend their most time on. And it was about 40% of their time they were spent away from the bay at the focus terminal, typing in the orders and checking people out. And so as we can release some of that burden on the bay host, we can potentially expand the number of bays that they can have, and then they can increase their tips even more. So that was another area that we really wanted to try to attack from that. So we're in the early stages. We're in 3 venues right now, and it's been going fairly decently. We can talk about change management.
Fairly decently. Don't make too big a commitment on that.
Yeah, I don't want to overcommit on that, but it's actually, it's been really good. And I could talk about a little bit about change management. That's a big piece of this whole pie. And how do you pitch this to your team? So I think I'll just talk about that real quick. So one thing, the reaction that you would get when you're implementing these sort of things is your team's probably going to be like, well, you're trying to implement something that's going to take my job, right? Like that's the first reaction. And it's like the reality of the situation is we all don't have enough people to work in our restaurant. So it's either we close bays or we figure out a way to keep them open. And that's what we had to try to figure out. So the other area that's one piece of the pie. That's one piece that we have tough conversations if we need to. I think on the other side is just the reason that we went down this path of like giving it to the guest was around the comments that we were getting from our guests. Like, I would spend more if I could find a bay host, or like, I can't ever find my person. And so whenever we kind of go through the change management, we kind of pitch it like this. I came from Amazon, and at Amazon, they have something called APEP. So it was called Attack Processes Engage People. And what that meant is, instead of just going to someone and saying, I just need you to work harder, like, you figure out what is the process that's affecting their ability to, make that significant jump. And so as I pitch this to, the team, we talk about, hey, bay host, we could come to you and say, I need you to be in every bay at all times. Or we could take a step back and say, that is not possible for one human to be in every single bay at all times. What is the process that we're going to change to allow you to be in every bay at all times? And that's kind of how we pitch it to our team, is like, hey, we're giving you the tools necessary to actually make, be in every single bay at all time, and hopefully help your tips and allow you to get more bays.
Yeah, but there is absolutely a fear on the part of staff. And it's funny, just anecdotally, we have 2 breweries that just went live. One had no prior POS. The other one had a prior POS and was classic full service. The first one went swimmingly well, no preconceived notions. Staff is, no joke, making $80 an hour because they're making so many tips. They love it, totally bought in. Second one said, you're going to take our jobs. We want the old system back. We want people to line up at the counter, which is what they were doing previously. And they were doing way less volume than the new one that just opened. So getting people bought in is the hardest part. The numbers always support it. And I have not figured out, maybe you have, maybe someone has, the human side of how to convince people other than the data. Because I'm convinced by data, but I'm not sure that the servers and the staff believe the data. I don't know if you have any anecdotes on that.
I think part of that too is, out of everybody who's here, who works or has ever worked in the service industry, waiting tables, any of that. Okay, so out of all of those people, when did you have the best, experience, connection with your guest? Was it when you were talking to them about their meal, talking to them about something special that's going on, checking in with them about the special occasion that they're there, or was it while you were running their credit card? So the whole point behind this is not that, it's automating the tasks that don't affect the guest in a positive way. It's a transactional experience. It's not the guest satisfaction piece of it. It's taking the labor work. No server. If you have ever been a server and you have a 12 top and somebody just you go drop the check and then you come back and you always knew because the book was open because there's that stack of credit cards in there and you just did not want to go and deal with all that, that's now gone because you can split everything and the guests can take care of it all themselves. So it's taking the grunt work out. It's taking the labor task heavy piece of things and being able to say, you know what, you don't have to do that piece of this anymore. They can do that for themselves. And for the guest, if you've ever been sitting there waiting to pay your check and you're like, where's the server? What's going on? Why is this taking forever? Instead now, just 2 clicks and you're done. So it's better for the guest for them to be able to just boom, boom, be done. Anybody here who has kids and goes to a restaurant, when the kids are done dining, you need to get out of that restaurant because they will make your life a living hell. So instead, it's great. I had a general manager that I used to work with. He came into Stone. His kid was definitely done. And he like looked at me and was like, I don't know what this is, but you need to tell me more about this because we gotta go. But I don't have time to talk to you right now. So it's being able to take those pain points away and take away the labor side of it and focus on the guest experience. At least for us at Stone, that was a great way that we were able to sell it back to our team. Because it is, you get that perception of like, oh, well, we're gonna run with less servers. It's like, well, less servers, we were tip pool. Less servers mean that there's less divide on that tip pool, which means you're all going to be making more money. So yes, you may have a 15-table section, but all you're doing is getting them started, handing them off, and keeping tabs on everybody. And you're able to spend more time talking about our amazing beer with your guests. So it was definitely kind of a change in the perspective that you have to kind of break people out of that old mentality of, oh, well, this is the way it's always been. I don't know whoever heard the keynote this morning that John was talking about it. If you're waiting to adopt new technology, you're just going to be left behind, and then you're scrambling to catch up. For Stone, we were one of the first places that was really using the QR-based ordering, and people were coming in, and at first they did not like it. They were adamant against it, and so we had to really massage it with people and get them to understand what was going on. And by the time I had left Stone, it was just second nature that people were coming in. They knew how to do it. The service team was able to really focus more on that guest experience.
Second that, Rich. So it's all about the experience. So at Topgolf, you've got the game element, and there's always a question of, what's your favorite game, or I'm not a golfer, how far should I hit it, and all that sort of stuff. Well, pre-COVID, our bay hosts or servers, they had more time, we had more labor and all that stuff. Once COVID hit, they're stretched. Even these days, they're stretched a little bit thin. And so without an order and pay system, they are behind the scenes, entering in orders and things like that. And we've seen in our guest surveys that the experience side has suffered. So that is one of our objectives, is actually improving the guest experience by freeing up the bay host time from doing things like credit card swipes or sitting at the point of sale terminal. So I wholeheartedly second that.
I can tell you just if you look at the feedback we see, yes, there are detractors. Yes, there are some people who say, hell no, I don't want to do this. But that's also where humans can stand in. But for that, we've seen a trend since pre-COVID, when we were doing this, and then into COVID, when people were thankful for it, and then a year into 2021, when people were like, I don't want to see another QR in my life because that reminds me of COVID. And then now we're back to, well, actually a QR is better than no server. Right? And that's kind of where we've seen the world shift, is some people have found they actually love it. Some people, we've actually seen the percentage of people who would write in, it was probably started pre-COVID, like 4 out of 5 people loved it. 1 person hated it. And now it's like 9 out of 10, or maybe even 19 out of 20. There's always going to be somebody who's unhappy with it. But to have that many who love it, to write in about it, to me kind of says something. Did you have a question? Okay, sorry. Yeah.
So we were never doing tip pooling, and we still aren't. Our tip structure is quite complicated, but the bay hosts are the main ones that get tipped, and then the runners get a tip off of the sales. So the bay hosts, by expanding their sections, are the main ones that get the highest impact on this. Yeah, one thing that I didn't mention is the thing that we are slightly different than Stone is that we kept our POS. So we have Focus POS right now, and the team is able to see their tips in that through that integration. So it wasn't as big of an issue for us.
I can answer that because you mentioned me also. It is an issue, and one of the features of GoTab is that you can walk out on your check because we have a card on file. We say in the terms that you will just be tipped out at the standard percentage. As an anecdote across all of our locations, we see no more than 1% deviation from whatever the recommended tip was. So if it's 20%, the worst case scenario you'll see is 19, but no one even gets to that. Yeah. You can in our system, but the reality is people get used to at least GoTab and maybe other systems, I don't know. We see about 30% of guests just walk out. So they actually haven't picked a tip. They've implicitly picked a tip. And so we don't feel like we should make the guest go through that pay process. If they just feel like leaving, they've already said, I agree to this. Why inconvenience them further? I do think there's a little getting over the hump of like that, I got to see the cash, show me the money type model. And candidly, I don't, as a restaurant owner, I don't love that model of like cash out every night. I don't think it teaches the right behavior. Our servers make more money. So once they start seeing the money come in those checks, then they're kind of like, oh, well, I can handle this. But getting them over that hump takes a little time. I say our servers, they're our client servers, but they're people who use GoTab. We run these competitions and stuff internally where they recommend them. It's fun. So they're ours too, in a sense. So we were going to jump into a demo because there's some things we want to touch. So you have QRs on your table. Gerard, do you mind flipping over to the KDS? Is everything ready to go? Okay. So real quick, you can order. I think we have you turned off security and that. I think it's just a phone number to verify. Okay. So real quick, as I was mentioning, these are $0 items. Everything's free. There are limited inventory on certain items. I think there's a Amazon gift card on there for $100. So if anybody wants to flip around to the menu, there's only one of those, so you can place your order fast before the inventory burns out. And then we'll talk about a couple of different things that happen. So there you go. What do you want? So she found it clearly on the menu. So there's a couple different things that happen because on GoTab we learned early on if you start letting guests control the experience, they will control the experience. And what I mean by that is a server constrains a lot of things. Oh, you didn't limit the quantity. Oh. So clearly we are on a fast on the draw. The point is the server does a couple things. They throttle ordering. And I take that term from delivery and takeout because we do delivery and takeout. But a server naturally constricts the ability to order, right? When they constrict that ability to order, you sell less stuff. But what they also do is they don't order all at the same time. So if you have 10 people sitting at the same table, do you have batching turned on? We don't have people yet ordering from the same table. There's going to be some interesting stuff happen if you can get some people to order from the same QR, because I think we set these up as, there we go. Okay, so there's a perfect example. Chris just ordered 2 orders, and those are both going to chair 13. So chair 13, that second order just skipped the line. So that would, if you were running a normal kitchen, you'd be running first in, first out. If you're printing your tickets, that ticket would be sitting somewhere else in the pile. And I believe it or not, I've seen it where I've walked into a restaurant and they turned off their KDS and said, we're using tickets. And I'm like, that's a stupid model. Let me show you what software does. So the software will reorganize according to destination, according to make time. We don't have make times turned on here. Depending on how long it's going to take, it's going to batch or skip the line for efficiency purposes. The thing that everybody thinks about GoTab is they think it's just for front of house labor saving. It's absolutely not. It is back of house, it is runners, it is everything efficiency-wise, at least as far as how we envision it. And I think a lot of people have misunderstood that QRs are just a front of house savings, when in fact they're a whole operational savings.
Yeah, I'll talk about batching real quick. That was one of our key things that we were looking for when we were looking for a software for mobile ordering. What we didn't want to do is what we see at other solutions, which is pass the phone around. We didn't want our guests to have to pass their phone around to put in the orders. So GoTab actually created a solution for us. Now, we don't use their KDS because we had so much infrastructure in place. It would have been so costly to take that out to like move to this KDS. But we, what they do is they created a way to batch orders that were coming from different phones. So it basically holds the order for a small amount of time to like see if there's any other orders coming from the same QR code, and then sends that through to our Focus POS so that way those can batch together, because we didn't want to increase our food runner numbers, and we wanted to make sure that the guest food comes out on time. So that's worked pretty well in our venues with that batching functionality.
Hey, Gerard, do you mind messaging someone and telling them that they're not getting their gift card? Yeah, no, I want to show you, Okay. So one of the other things, again, dealing with logistics, specifically like patios and widely spread places, being able to get a hold of your guest who doesn't have an app installed on their phone is pretty important. Sometimes even asking them a question is pretty important. So what you could do in a normal restaurant is you send a runner out and you say, hey, can you go tell that person that there's no more hamburgers or there's no more cheese, and then find out what they want, and then they have to come back in and tell you what is going to happen. So whoever that is, Chris, since you're the lucky winner, Chris, he's on his, did you respond back? So, so Chris can respond back, and it's going to come back into the kitchen. It's going to know where different people are. So you've got two-way communication, both for takeout and delivery and dine-in. It turns out this is incredibly useful for takeout and curbside, because people sit in their cars in winter and they don't want to come in, and sometimes people don't notice, and it's really nice to text message. So anyway, it is multi-directional messaging. Great.
We use that functionality for, we have a waiting area. So if you've been to Topgolf, there's a large bars in our venue. And so that's where people wait, and then they get called to their bay. And so we have to use that functionality to be like, hey, what bay did you go to? Because sometimes we just completely lose them. They order at the common space, and then they get sent to a bay, and we have to send them a text message, hey, what bay did you go to? It's very helpful.
Yeah. So you can do what's called a partial dispatch. Let me show you. So it's really up to Expo. So if Expo says, you can see this one, chair 25, you have Paul and Randy. Notice those are two separate people ordered totally separately. You could bump just Paul's ticket, and it's just going to send out Paul's ticket. The other one's going to drop back into its position in the queue. But of course, you could recall that ticket, which should be here, and it's going to rebatch them. So there's a couple different things it's going to do. We don't have prep time set on all these products, so they don't. If you had prep times, it would automatically drop them off. Say you had like a 20-minute order followed by, a 5-minute drink followed by a 20-minute order. It's not going to batch them based on the prep time required, because you're not going to hold back the drink for the food. And depending if you're doing coursing, there's a whole bunch of craziness, which we didn't even touch on, because there's a lot of things Gerard didn't show. It is a prep expo, plus you can 86. So this is what he should have shown you, is you could go 86 the gift card directly from the kitchen, which is a very useful feature, should you want to do that. So we could take off, for example, the sunglasses right now. And again, everything we do is around high volume, low labor costs, because if you just took a bunch of orders for sunglasses you don't have, how many people do you have to go talk to? How many things do you have to unwind? How many things do you have to give away? That's all cost. And you don't have time either. Yeah, there's two reservation systems we're integrating with right now. They're going to text message those are more for fine dining, because that's where you have reservations. We do have a new feature called text a tab, or text my tab, which is actually where you never have to type in your card. You put your card into a card terminal. It sets up your profile and it text messages you your card as well as your profile, so you never enter your card data on your phone. So I can demo that if someone wants to see it later. Sorry? The two that are probably going to come first is going to be hopefully OpenTable and Resi.
So at times, I think a big piece of it was specifically for Stone, we still had servers that were managing their area, but then we would have a laptop that was typically set up at the host stand, as well as one that was back by the bar. So this way, if it was something, depending on the message that's coming in, and also you could see the messaging in the kitchen as well. So if the message that's coming through is, hey, can I get us out of catch-up? Food runner is able to see that message, respond back, and send someone out with the catch-up, versus someone saying, hey, there's a hair in my, salad, and then in that case, then a manager can tag in. And again, because specifically for us, for the size of our venue, everyone on our team had walkie-talkies on, so if the host saw something, they could flag it, let a manager know, get someone to the table within 30 seconds of that message coming through, instead of them having to wait, find a server, go get the manager, get them back over, get the food refired as well. So it just helped cut down on our time in order to make sure that our guests were leaving satisfied.
So we actually turned off the messaging functionality for the guests to message us. We message them, and then they can message us back, but we don't actually have them message all the time.
Yeah, we actually recommend that for people who don't want to man or woman the messaging, because it's worse to let people think they can talk to you and not answer the phone than just to not even give the impression that you want to talk to them. So there's almost everything in GoTab's configurable because everybody has different levels of service they're willing to commit to.
Yeah, we turned it off for two reasons. It was one because of the not having someone that would be specifically the person to answer all the messages. The second one was we didn't want people to send modifications through the messaging functionality because we wanted to track our COGS. And so we wanted to make sure that they sent all modifications through the selections of the modifications built into the system.
Yep. Which on the kitchen side of things is really nice as well. So you don't have the server version of open food typing in all of the modifiers, then not being able to track anything. So for this, you're taking it. Anybody again who's ever worked in the service industry, you take something out, you drop off the food item, and the guest says, "Oh, that's not what I ordered." Now you have it exactly how they put it in on their phone. So it's kind of like this is what you ordered. So it holds them a little bit more accountable, but as well, you're only able to. You can set it up to only put in the modifications that you want available for that dish, so you don't have somebody trying to Frankenstein, a brand new dish out of something, and then your kitchen is slowing down. It helped exponentially speed up our service because you didn't have tons of all these random one-off modifications. Or if somebody had an allergy or they needed something, we would still able to accommodate. But when people don't have as many of those you see it with so many of the different ordering platforms. If you don't have the ability to overly customize, it can make the flow in the back of the house so much faster and smoother.
Yeah, one random side note that Rich touched on is sendbacks go way down. If you're on QRs, nobody makes the argument that I meant to order a cheeseburger when I ordered a hamburger because they're going to pull up their phone and it tells them that. You don't even have to have the argument, and you have less people getting angry at the operator. Because they're like, oh, well, that was stupid. I guess I did order a hamburger. So it's a savings that we didn't even know we would create. Sorry. Someone else raise their hand? You can, or if you have a server cocktailing, they can absolutely walk out. So we're a full POS. This is purely the QR part. If you had a server walking out, they can grab your tab, add to your tab. You can actually, yeah, absolutely. Everything's real time. So In fact, if you want, we could show you. It's really cool because it updates the screens simultaneously, both on the guest interface and vice versa. But yes, to your point, if we don't read minds yet, we are heading that direction. So, yeah. Yeah. It depends. So we do have a one-click order, which is, so you find what it is and you hit order, and you're not going through a cart and then hit. If you have an open tab, there's a bunch of features that show up depending on the context. You don't typically have a one-click order for takeout because you want the guest to kind of review it before you send it. It's a different thing to just buy a beer or a glass of wine with one click and just say go, because you can hopefully unwind it, and worst case scenario, it's not a problem. But there's a lot of conveniences that are really small and subtle that make it either nice or painful. Anything else?
What a great session. Thank you so much.